The day Karen McAllister set fire to our community forest was the day she thought she'd outsmarted everyone. She stood there, smug as ever, claiming it was to get rid of pests. While flames devoured the trees my late father planted decades ago. What she didn't know was that I, a quiet widower who'd kept my head down, held the contract for our town's fire department dispatch system a secret that would burn her plans to ashes. If you're watching this from your couch, shaking your head at another HOA horror story, drop a comment below telling me which city in the United States you're listening from. And send me an email if you've ever dealt with this kind of HOA nonsense in your life. Emails pinned in the first comment. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and until 6 months ago, I was just another face in Willow Creek, a gated community in upstate New York, known for its sprawling homes and a 20-acre forest preserve that gave it that close-to-nature charm. I'm 47, a retired telecommunications engineer, widowed 3 years ago when my wife, Laura, passed from leukemia. Since then, it's just been me and my 16-year-old son, Noah, trying to piece our lives back together. The forest was our sanctuary, a place where Laura used to walk with us, teaching Noah the names of trees and birds. It's also where my father, a botanist, planted rare native species in the 90s, turning a barren patch into a thriving ecosystem. That forest wasn't just trees. It was my family's legacy. We moved to Willow Creek 2 years ago for a fresh start. The realtor raved about the community's pristine aesthetics and active HOA. Led by Karen McAllister, a self-proclaimed guardian of property values. I didn't think much of her at first. I'd dealt with pushy types in my career, engineers, CEOs, you name it. How bad could one HOA president be? I should have seen the red flags when the welcome packet included a 47-page rulebook, thicker than a novel, with Karen's signature on every page like she was signing a royal decree. The trouble started in early spring, when Noah and I noticed dying trees in the forest. Leaves were curling, bark was peeling, and the air smelled faintly of chemicals. I'm no botanist like my dad, but I knew something was wrong. Noah, who's got his grandfather's knack for plants, was devastated. "Dad, these are Dad's trees," he said, pointing to a cluster of black walnuts. "They're not supposed to look like this." I promised we'd figure it out. We took samples, sent them to a lab, and waited. Meanwhile, I mentioned it at the next HOA meeting, expecting some concern. Instead, Karen, perched at the podium like a queen, dismissed me with a wave. "It's probably just seasonal shedding, Mr. Caldwell. The forest is fine. We have professionals handling it." Her professionals were a shady outfit called Green Guard Solutions, a pest control company she'd hired without a vote. I'd done my homework. Green Guard had a rap sheet of violations for improper chemical use, and their contract was suspiciously lucrative for a small community like ours. When I pressed Karen about it, her eyes narrowed. "Ethan, we don't need new residents stirring up trouble. The board trusts Green Guard. Perhaps you should focus on your own property compliance." The room went quiet. I felt Noah tense beside me. It was the first time I realized Karen didn't just enforce rules, she weaponized them. Things escalated fast. By late April, the forest was a disaster. Entire sections of underbrush were dead, and birds we used to hear every morning were gone. Noah spent hours documenting the damage, taking photos and videos for a school project. He was heartbroken, and I was furious. I emailed the HOA board demanding transparency about Green Guard's methods. No response. Instead, I got a violation notice for unauthorized signage because Noah had put up a small Save Our Forest poster near the trailhead. The fine, $200. I appealed, but Karen's board rejected it, claiming the poster disrupted community aesthetics. Then came the morning that changed everything. It was May 3rd, a chilly Saturday. Noah and I were walking the forest trail when we smelled smoke. At first, I thought it was a barbecue, but then we saw torrential flames licking up the hill, swallowing the black walnuts my father planted. Noah froze, his eyes wide. "Dad, the forest." I grabbed his arm, pulling him back as the fire spread, crackling through dry underbrush. We ran to the trailhead, where a crowd was gathering. And there, standing with her arms crossed, was Karen McAllister directing to Green Guard workers with gas cans. "It's under control," she snapped at a neighbor who asked what was happening. "We're conducting a controlled burn to eliminate invasive pests. It's standard procedure." Standard procedure. I'd worked in systems engineering long enough to know a lie when I heard one. Controlled burns require permits, fire department oversight, and community notice, none of which had happened. The flames were already out of hand, jumping to healthy trees. Neighbors were panicking, shouting about their kids playing nearby. I dialed 911, but before I could speak, Karen marched over, her face twisted with indignation. "Ethan, this is HOA business. Put that phone down. We don't need outsiders interfering." I ignored her, reporting the fire. Within minutes, sirens wailed, but the fire trucks didn't arrive. Later, I'd learned Wykerin had called the fire department herself, claiming it was a planned burn and to stand down. My call, routed through the dispatch system I'd designed years ago, was flagged as a duplicate. The fire grew, black smoke billowing over Willow Creek. Noah was shaking, tears streaking his face as he watched his grandfather's trees burn. "Why is she doing this, Dad?" he asked. I had no answer. Just a growing rage in my chest. By the time the fire department finally arrived 45 minutes later, half an acre was gone. Firefighters contained it, but the damage was catastrophic. My father's black walnuts were charred. Skeletons and the forest's ecosystem was wrecked. Karen, unfazed, spun her story to the crowd. The pests were out of control. Green Guard advised immediate action to protect property values. We saved the community from a worse disaster. Her allies on the board nodded like trained puppets, but I saw doubt in other neighbors' eyes. They were scared, angry, but too intimidated to speak up. That night, Noah couldn't sleep. He sat in his room, scrolling through his photos of the forest before the fire. "It's like she burned Grandpa too," he whispered. My heart broke. Laura and my father were gone, and now Karen was destroying the last piece of them we had. I vowed to fight back, but I needed leverage. That's when I remembered something from my past, a contract I'd secured years ago, one Karen couldn't possibly know about. Before I retired, I owned a small telecom company that specialized in emergency dispatch systems. In 2010, I'd personally designed and installed Willow Creek's fire department dispatch software, integrating it with the county's 911 system. The contract was still mine, renewed annually, giving me administrative access to the entire system. I could see every call, every dispatch log, and override commands if needed. Karen's stand-down call to the fire department. It was logged in my system, time-stamped, and recorded. She'd lied about the burn being planned, and I had the proof. But that was just the start. I started digging into Karen's actions, pulling records from the HOA and public databases. What I found was a pattern of abuse. Green Guard wasn't just incompetent. They were dumping unregistered pesticides in the forest, likely causing the die-off we'd noticed. Karen had signed off on their contracts without bids, funneling HOA funds to a company owned by her brother-in-law. She'd also been issuing fines to anyone who questioned her, driving out 3 families in the past year with relentless violations. Her goal? Control. The forest, she claimed, lowered property values by attracting undesirable wildlife and outsiders. Her real plan, I suspected, was to clear it for development, boosting her real estate portfolio. I wasn't alone in my fight. At a secret meeting in my garage, I connected with 2 allies, Marla Evans, a retired environmental scientist who'd clashed with Karen over recycling rules, and Javier Torres, a local contractor who'd been fined for unauthorized equipment storage. After refusing to pay GreenGuard's inflated rates, Marla had her own evidence soil samples from the forest showing toxic pesticide levels. Javier revealed Karen had pressured him to clear part of the forest for a community project that never materialized. Together, we formed a plan, but we needed more. The next day, I accessed the dispatch system logs. Karen's call to the fire department wasn't just a lie, was a deliberate attempt to delay response, risking lives and property. I also found emails she'd sent to the fire chief, claiming the HOA had pre-approved the burn. No such approval existed in the HOA minutes. She'd broken multiple laws, from environmental violations to reckless endangerment. But confronting her directly would be a mistake. Karen was cunning, with allies in local government and a knack for twisting narratives. I needed to play her game smarter. Over the next week, the HOA doubled down. Karen posted a newsletter, claiming the fire was a success and announced a $300 per household forest restoration fee. Neighbors grumbled, but paid, fearing her wrath. Meanwhile, Noah and I faced new violations: $150 for excessive yard debris, a single branch from the fire, and $250 for unapproved exterior lighting our porch light. Unchanged since we moved in. It was harassment, plain and simple. But it only fueled my resolve. Then came the bombshell. Marla's lab results confirmed the pesticides were banned substances, linked to health risks and illegal without EPA approval. GreenGuard's negligence wasn't just incompetence, it was criminal. I cross-referenced the dispatch logs and found GreenGuard's crew had been on site during the fire, not just as workers, but as accomplices. Karen had orchestrated the burn. To cover up their toxic mess, gambling that no one would dig deeper. She didn't know I had the dispatch system in my pocket, or that I was about to turn her own rules against her. As I sat in my study, staring at the dispatch logs and Marla's lab reports, I realized the fight was bigger than the forest. It was about protecting Noah, honoring my father's legacy, and stopping a tyrant who thought she was untouchable. But Karen was about to make her boldest move yet, one that would push me to the edge and force me to reveal my hand. What she didn't know was that every call she made, every lie she told, was being recorded in a system I controlled, and I was ready to use it to bring her empire crashing down. The smoke from the forest fire had barely cleared when Karen McAllister decided to tighten her grip on Willow Creek. She wasn't just content with burning my father's trees. She wanted to bury anyone who dared question her. But what she didn't know was that I was sitting on a digital goldmine, complete control over the fire department's dispatch system, with logs that could expose her lies. And just when she thought she had me cornered, I uncovered a twist so devastating it would flip her world upside down. After the fire, Willow Creek was a powder keg. Neighbors whispered in their driveways, furious about the charred remains of our forest, but too scared to confront Karen directly. Her newsletter, claiming the burn was a triumph against pests, was taped to every mailbox, complete with a glossy photo of her smiling next to a GreenGuard truck. It was propaganda, pure and simple, and it made my blood boil. Noah, my 16-year-old son, was still reeling from watching his grandfather's black walnuts go up in flames. "She's lying, Dad," he said, his voice cracking as he showed me a video he'd taken of the fire's aftermath. "She doesn't care about the forest. She just wants to control everything." I hugged him tight, promising we'd make this right. But Karen was about to raise the stakes in ways I never expected. A week after the fire, the HOA board, stacked with Karen's loyalists, held an emergency meeting at the community center. I showed up with Marla Evans, the retired environmental scientist, and Javier Torres, the contractor who'd been targeted by Karen's fines. The room was packed, tension thick as the smoke that still lingered in the air. Karen stood at the podium, her signature blonde bob flawless, her voice dripping with fake sincerity. "The forest incident was unfortunate," she began, "but necessary to protect our community's safety and property values. GreenGuard's experts confirmed. The pest infestation was a threat to our homes." I nearly laughed out loud. The lab reports Marla had shared proved GreenGuard's pesticides were the real threat, poisoning the soil and killing wildlife. But Karen wasn't done. "To ensure this never happens again," she continued, "we're proposing a $500 per household special assessment for forest restoration and enhanced pest control measures." The room erupted in murmurs. $500. Most families were still paying off the last emergency fee. Karen had pushed through for a decorative fountain that only her friends' houses could see. A neighbor, Mrs. Patel, raised her hand timidly. "Karen, shouldn't we vote on this?" "And what about the fire permits? I heard there weren't any." Karen's smile tightened, her eyes flashing. "Mrs. Patel, the board has full authority to act in emergencies. Permits were handled through proper channels. Perhaps you should trust the professionals." It was a lie, and I knew it. My dispatch system logs showed no permit requests, only Karen's call to delay the fire trucks. But before I could speak, Javier stood up. "What about GreenGuard's contract? Why no bids? My company could have done the job for half the cost." Karen's face reddened. "Mr. Torres, your company was disqualified due to prior violations. Sit down." The meeting ended with the assessment passing, thanks to Karen's board outvoting the room. But the real blow came the next day. I got a letter from the HOA, signed by Karen herself, accusing me of spreading misinformation about the fire and inciting discord. The penalty? A $1,000 fine and a warning that further disruptive behavior could lead to a lien on my house. Noah found me staring at the letter, my hands shaking with rage. "Dad, she's trying to scare us into leaving," he said. Was right. Karen had done this before 3 families had sold their homes at a loss after endless fines and harassment. I wasn't about to be the 4th. I called Marla and Javier for an emergency meeting at my house. Marla brought more lab results. The pesticides GreenGuard used were not only banned, but linked to neurological issues in children exposed to contaminated soil. "This is criminal negligence," she said, slamming the report on my table. Karen knew GreenGuard was dumping this stuff. The fire was probably to cover it up. Javier nodded, pulling out a stack of invoices he'd gotten from a whistleblower. "At GreenGuard, look at this $200,000 for forest maintenance over 2 years, paid directly to Karen's brother-in-law's account. No receipts, no oversight. The pieces were falling into place. Karen wasn't just a control freak. She was running a racket, using the HOA to funnel money to her family while destroying our forest for her own gain." I logged into my dispatch system that night, digging deeper. The logs were damning. Karen's call to the fire department had been made from her personal cell, time-stamped 10 minutes before my 911 call. She'd told the dispatcher it was a controlled burn and to hold off unless she called again. That delay had let the fire rage out of control, endangering lives and torching my father's legacy. I downloaded the audio file and backed it up on 3 separate drives. This was my ace, but I needed more to take her down for good. The next morning, Karen upped the ante. She announced a community cleanup event in the forest, mandatory for all residents with a $250 fine for non-attendance. The flyer claimed it was to heal the land. But Marla's contacts at the county environmental office tipped us off. GreenGuard was planning to spread more pesticides under the guise of restoration. I confronted Karen at the HOA office, a sterile room decorated with her real estate awards. "This cleanup is a sham," I said, holding up Marla's lab report. "Your pesticides are killing the forest, and that fire was no accident." She didn't flinch. "Ethan, you're out of your depth. File another appeal if you want, but the board stands with me." And if you keep spreading lies, I'll make sure your son's little forest project gets you both sued for defamation. Her threat against Noah was the last straw. That night, I sat Noah down. "I'm going to fight this, but it might get ugly," I told him. "Are you okay with that?" He nodded, his jaw set. "Grandpa would have fought. Mom too. Do it, Dad." His words lit a fire in me hotter than the one Karen had set. I wasn't just fighting for the forest anymore. This was for my family. My son and every neighbor she'd bullied into silence. I spent the next few days building our case. Marla connected me with a friend at the EPA who confirmed GreenGuard's pesticides violated federal regulations. Javier dug up permits showing Karen had never applied for a controlled burn, a felony in New York, if it endangered property or lives. But the real breakthrough came when I met with Tom Reynolds, a retired county clerk who'd known my father. We met at a diner 30 miles away to avoid Karen's spies. Tom had been tracking land deals in Willow Creek and dropped a bombshell. Karen was secretly negotiating to buy the forest's lease from the county, which owned the land under a 25-year agreement with the HOA. The lease was set to expire in 2 months, and Karen's real estate company, McAllister Properties, was poised to snap it up for a steal $400,000, far below its $1.2 million value. Her plan? Clear the forest, claim it was unsalvageable, and build luxury condos. "How's she pulling this off?" I asked. Tom leaned forward, lowering his voice. "She's got the county assessor in her pocket, her cousin, Diane. They're rushing the sale before the lease expires. Most residents don't even know the HOA doesn't own the forest outright." My mind raced. Karen's fire wasn't just a cover-up for GreenGuard's mess, was a deliberate move to devalue the land so she could buy it cheap. But Tom had one more surprise. "Your dad's name is still on the original lease," he said, sliding me a faded document. "He was a co-signer for the community trust that set up the forest preserve. That gives his heirs, meaning you, first right of refusal if the county sells." I stared at the paper, my father's signature staring back at me. This was the twist I'd been waiting for. As his heir, I had legal standing to outbid Karen for the forest, and with my telecom savings, I had the cash to do it. But there was a catch. The county required a formal bid within 30 days. And Karen's cousin was fast-tracking her offer. I needed to act fast, and I needed to keep it secret. If Karen got wind of my plan, she'd bury me in fines, or worse. Back home, I shared the news with Marla and Javier. "We can buy the forest," I said, showing them the lease. "But we need to move quietly." Karen's got eyes everywhere. Marla's eyes lit up. "We can use my EPA contact to file an injunction against GreenGuard's pesticides. Stall her cleanup and buy us time." Javier grinned. "And I've got buddies in construction who can vouch for the forest's value. Make it harder for her to lowball the county." We were building an army, but Karen was about to make her boldest move yet. The next day, she posted notices around Willow Creek announcing a forest revitalization plan. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. The plan called for clearing the remaining trees, supposedly too damaged to Zavent, replacing them with a modern green space featuring paved walkways and a private clubhouse. The price tag? A $1,000 per household assessment on top of the $500 we were already paying. At the community meeting to discuss it, Karen's allies shouted down any opposition. When Mrs. Patel tried to speak again, Karen cut her off. "If you don't like it, sell your house," she snapped. "Willow Creek isn't for everyone." The room went silent. She was daring us to fight back. That night, I logged into the dispatch system again, cross-referencing Karen's calls. I found something new. A second call made an hour after the fire to a private number belonging to her brother-in-law at GreenGuard. The audio was crystal clear. "Make sure the crew cleans up any evidence of the chemicals," Karen said. "We can't have anyone sniffing around," was a smoking gun proof she'd ordered a cover-up. I saved the file, my heart pounding. This wasn't just about the forest anymore. It was about exposing a criminal conspiracy. But Karen wasn't done. The next morning, Noah came home from school in tears. Some kids said, "We're getting kicked." "Out," he sobbed. Their parents heard we're troublemakers, and the HOA's going to sue us. I tracked the rumor to Karen's best friend, Linda, who'd been spreading lies at the school pickup line. It was a low blow, targeting my son to break me. I was done playing nice. I called Tom Reynolds and told him to prepare my bid for the forest, $500,000, all cash, to be submitted anonymously through a trust I'd set up. I also contacted my EPA connection, who filed an emergency injunction against GreenGuard, halting their cleanup pending an investigation. As the injunction hit, Karen panicked. She called another emergency HOA meeting, claiming the forest was now a public health hazard and needed immediate action. She proposed seizing my property under an obscure HOA bylaw for endangering the community. With my baseless accusations, it was a desperate power grab, but it backfired. Javier leaked her plan to our growing network of neighbors, and 20 households showed up to the meeting, ready to fight. Marla presented her lab reports, exposing the pesticides, and I played Karen's dispatch call for the room. Gasps filled the air as her voice echoed, admitting to the cover-up. Karen's face went white. "That's fabricated." She screamed, but the crowd wasn't buying it. The meeting ended in chaos, with residents demanding an audit of HOA funds. Karen stormed out, vowing to fix this, but I wasn't done. Late that night, Tom called with news. My anonymous bid had been accepted by the county, outbidding Karen's by $100,000. The forest was mine, or rather, my father's trusts. I owned the land Karen had burned, and she had no idea. But as I celebrated with Marla and Javier, a new problem emerged. Karen had just filed a lawsuit against me personally, claiming I'd sabotaged her restoration and defamed her company. The fight was far from over, and she was coming for blood. Karen McAllister thought she could burn my father's forest, bully my son, and sue me into submission. But she was about to learn the hard way that I held all the cards. With the forest now legally mine and her lies recorded in the fire department's dispatch system I controlled, I was ready to turn her empire of intimidation into a pile of ashes. Her downfall was coming, and it would be public, poetic, and so satisfying it'd have the whole neighborhood cheering. The days after my anonymous bid secured the forest were a whirlwind. Karen's lawsuit against me claiming defamation and community endangerment hit my mailbox like a brick. She demanded $50,000 in damages and a public apology, accusing me of fabricating evidence to undermine Willow Creek's values. It was a desperate move, but dangerous. Karen had connections, her cousin Diane in the county assessor's office, a buddy on the town council, and a lawyer who'd been milking HOA funds for years. Meanwhile, her harassment campaign ramped up. Noah and I got hit with new violations. $300 for unauthorized mailbox design. It was the same mailbox every house on our street had. And $400 for excessive noise from a backyard barbecue we'd hosted with Marla and Javier. The message was clear: back off or lose everything. But I wasn't backing off. I had the forest's deed, Marla's damning pesticide reports, Javier's whistleblower invoices, and the dispatch logs proving Karen's fire was no accident. My allies, Marla, Javier, and now 25 households fed up with Karen's tyranny were ready to fight. We met in secret at Javier's workshop, plotting our next move. "She's panicking," Marla said, her eyes gleaming. "That lawsuit's a bluff, but we need to hit her where it hurts publicly." Javier nodded, pulling up a grainy photo on his phone. "Got this from a buddy at GreenGuard. It's Karen with her brother-in-law signing off on pesticide deliveries last year. No permits, no EPA approval. I stared at the dispatch audio file on my laptop. I've got her voice telling GreenGuard to cover up the chemicals. You were not just taking her down, we're exposing her whole operation. The plan came together fast. First, we needed to neutralize her lawsuit. I hired Rachel Nguyen, a sharp environmental lawyer recommended by Marla's EPA contact. Rachel reviewed our evidence and grinned like she'd just won the lottery. "This isn't just a slam dunk, it's a public execution," she said. Karen's violated federal environmental laws, committed fraud, and endangered lives with that fire. We countersue for damages, emotional distress, and punitive penalties. I hesitated, thinking of Noah. Will this drag on? I don't want my son caught in a legal mess. Rachel shook her head. With this evidence, we'll bury her before she can blink. But we need a stage to make it stick. That stage came. Sooner than expected. Karen, desperate to salvage her reputation, announced a Willow Creek Forest fundraiser gala at the community center, a black tie event to raise funds for restoration and celebrate our community's resilience. The invitation list was selective, excluding me, Marla, Javier, and anyone who'd spoken against her. It was a power play designed to rally her allies and paint us as troublemakers. But it was also the perfect opportunity. She's handing us a spotlight, I told the group. We crash her gala, expose her lies, and use my dispatch access to seal the deal. The night of the gala, Willow Creek's community center was decked out like a prom gone wrong, string lights, fake ferns, and a banner reading "Save Our Forest." Karen, in a glittering green dress, worked the room, schmoozing with her cronies and the town councilman she'd charmed. Noah stayed home, but he'd helped me prepare, burning a copy of the dispatch audio onto a USB drive. "Make her pay, Dad," he'd said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. I carried that USB like a loaded gun. Marla, Javier, and I arrived uninvited, flanked by Mrs. Patel and 5 other neighbors who'd joined our cause. The doormaker's nephew tried to stop us, but Javier flashed a fake catering badge. He'd whipped up, and we slipped inside. The room was packed with Willow Creek's elite, sipping champagne while a string quartet played. Karen was mid-speech, praising GreenGuard's heroic efforts and announcing a new $2,000 per household assessment to secure the forest's future. I caught Mrs. Patel's eye. She was trembling with anger, but ready. I stepped to the front, interrupting Karen's speech. "Mind if I say a few words?" I called out, loud enough to silence the quartet. Karen's face froze, her smile a brittle mask. "Ethan, this is a private event. Leave, or I'll call security." I held up my phone, already connected to the center's AV system thanks to a favor from Javier's tech-savvy cousin. I think everyone deserves to hear this first. Before she could react, I hit play, and Karen's voice filled the room. Clear as day. "Make sure the crew cleans up any evidence of the chemicals. We can't have anyone sniffing around." The crowd gasped. Karen lunged for the AV controls, but Javier blocked her, his contractor's frame immovable. "Let it play," he said, his voice low but firm. The audio continued, detailing her call to delay the fire department. I followed it with Marla's lab reports projected on the screen charts, showing illegal pesticide levels in the forest's soil. The room erupted in chaos. Karen's allies shouted denials, but the evidence was undeniable. Mrs. Patel stood up, her voice shaking but strong. "You poisoned our forest and lied about it. My kids played there." Other neighbors joined in, their anger breaking through years of fear. Karen's face was a study in panic. "This is a setup," she screamed. "He's lying to sabotage me." But the tide had turned. The town councilman, sweating, slipped out the back. Rachel Nguyen stepped forward, holding up our countersuit papers. "Ms. McAllister, you're..." being served for environmental violations, fraud, and reckless endangerment. The EPA's already investigating GreenGuard, and we've got a criminal complaint ready for the fire. Karen's lawyer, a Weasley guy in a cheap suit, tried to intervene, but the crowd drowned him out with booze. That's when I dropped the bomb. "Oh, and one more thing," I said, holding up the forest's deed. "The forest you burned. It's mine now. Ah, outbid your shady deal with the county. Karen, you torched my father's legacy, but you'll never touch it again." The room went silent, then exploded in cheers. Karen's jaw dropped, her eyes wild with disbelief. "You can't, you don't," she stammered, "but I cut her off. Check the county records. It's done." The gala collapsed into pandemonium. Karen fled, her heels clicking as she shoved through the crowd. But the real justice came the next day. I used my dispatch system access to forward the audio logs to the county prosecutor, who opened a criminal investigation into Karen and GreenGuard. The EPA swooped in, shutting down GreenGuard's operations and fining Karen's brother-in-law $500,000 for illegal pesticide use. Karen's lawsuit against me was dismissed when Rachel presented our evidence in court. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who dealt with Karen's antics before, called it frivolous and ordered Karen to pay my legal fees. But I wasn't done. With the forest now under my trust, I announced a community restoration project, funded by my telecom savings and donations from neighbors who'd turned against Karen. We planted new trees, black walnuts, just like my father's aunt set up. A conservation program for kids. Led by Noah, I also transferred the forest to a community trust with strict protections ensuring no HOA could ever touch it again. The kicker? The trust's bylaws banned anyone with a criminal record from serving on its board. A clause I added with Karen in mind. Karen's empire crumbled fast. Her real estate company, already leveraged to the hilt, went bankrupt when her brother-in-law's fines drained their accounts. The HOA board, facing an audit sparked by our evidence, uncovered $300,000 in misappropriated funds, all traced to Karen's pet projects. She was charged with fraud, environmental crimes, and reckless endangerment for the fire. Last I heard, she was facing 5 years in prison and had put her house up for sale no takers thanks to her toxic reputation. Her cousin Diane resigned from the county assessor's office after an ethics probe, and the town councilman lost his re-election bid when our story hit the local news. A month later, Noah and I stood in the forest, now dotted with new saplings. Kids from the neighborhood ran around, learning plant names from Noah's conservation class. "Grandpa would love this," Noah said, smiling for the first time in months. I nodded, thinking of Laura and my father. "Yeah, kid. And your mom would too." We'd turned Karen's destruction into something beautiful. A legacy reborn from the ashes she'd created. Willow Creek changed after that. The HOA was restructured with term limits and transparent voting, led by Mrs. Patel, who'd found her voice. The forest became a community pride point, with signs dedicating it to my father's memory. And me. I kept my dispatch contract, a quiet reminder that sometimes the smallest advantage, like a back door into a system, can topple a tyrant. If you're watching this while battling your own HOA nightmare, remember, dig deep, find their weak spot, and don't let them scare you. Sometimes, the best revenge is taking back what's yours and making it better than ever.